for this Bank Holiday Monday.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome to your lunchtime briefing. My name is Gloria De Piero. We've got lots coming up for you today. We'll be talking about the big political stories of the day with ex-Conservative Minister Ed Vaizey and ex-Labour MP Stephen Powell. Will be heading to Scotland to talk about those bin strikes. How on earth are people coping up there? And I have a real meat interview with the shadow Scottish Secretary Ian Murray, who, aged just 9, watched his dad suddenly collapse and die. All that after your news. Good afternoon, it's 12 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. NASA is making its final preparations ahead of the launch of its new moon rocket later today. The unmanned rocket is the world's most powerful to date. It's going to propel a test capsule called Orion far from Earth into the moon's orbit. It's called the Artemis 1 mission, and it's aiming to prove that people can go to the moon for longer and more sustainably than ever before. Well, we can see the final preparations underway live. It's going to take off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Engineers are working towards a 2-hour launch window that opens at 1:30 today. We'll, of course, bring you live coverage here on GB News. In the final week of campaigning in the Conservative leadership contest, Liz Truss's team says she favours targeted support to ease the cost of living crisis. However, the Tory leadership candidate says she's not ruling anything out. Ms Truss also says it wouldn't be right to announce her entire plan before she's seen the full Whitehall analysis. Well, Global Chief Executive of the market research company Ipsos, Ben Page, says the Foreign Secretary's under pressure.
Public now wants to see more action and more spending. She's slightly against the grain of the things that she says she stands for, but she's probably going to be forced to do it when she turns her attention from the small number of people who are, of course, choosing the leader of the Conservative Party to the electorate as a whole.
Environment Minister and Team Rishi supporter Victoria Prentice told us the former Chancellor believes help should go to those who need it most.
Rishi's plan is very much to target that help at the most vulnerable households. So, for example, pensioner households or people with disabilities or households on the lowest incomes. And I think that's the right way to go. I know this is hard for everybody, but for some people it's really hard and we need to help them get through it.
Residents living near Europe's biggest nuclear facility in Ukraine are being given iodine tablets amid fears of a nuclear accident. Authorities handed out the medication to parents and children living close to the Zaporizhzhia power station amid intense fighting there. A team from the International Atomic Energy Agency is on its way to investigate the Russian-occupied facility, saying its safety and security must be protected. The Queen sent a message to the President of Pakistan, saying she's deeply saddened by the tragic loss of life and destruction due to flooding across the country. It follows an appeal by Pakistan for international support, as more than 1,000 people have been killed. Unusually heavy monsoon rains have caused floods in both the north and the south of the country, destroying farmland, crops and impacting more than 30 million people. The country's foreign minister is requesting financial help and aid from United Nations member states.
They're absolutely devastating. I haven't seen any destruction or devastation of this scale. I find it very difficult to put into words the phraseologies that we're used to, whether it's monsoon rains or flooding, doesn't quite seem to encapsulate the ongoing devastation and disaster that we're still witnessing.
The Royal Navy's largest warship has broken down overnight off the south coast of the UK, shortly after embarking for exercises in the US. HMS Prince of Wales left from Portsmouth Naval Base on Saturday when a mechanical issue occurred. The 65,000-tonne vessel's departure had already been delayed because of a technical issue. Newspaper editors have raised concerns over police guidance that instructs their officers to declare any relationship with a journalist. The guidance hasn't been released publicly. It advises officers, though, to declare any links in the same way they would with a criminal. The advice was issued by College of Policing a number of years ago, but has only recently come to light. The Society of Editors warn it equates journalists with the wrongdoing and corruption they seek to uncover. It's up to each force in England and Wales whether to follow the guidance. The government has confirmed Gibraltar's status as a city more than 180 years after it was first bestowed by Queen Victoria. The title was originally awarded in 1842, but it was then left off the official list of recognised cities. Now, a newly published record confirms Gibraltar's inclusion. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson describes the decision as a huge accolade to its rich history and dynamism. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, it's only a week to go until the new Conservative Party leader is announced. I'll be speaking to GB News political correspondent Tom Howard and former Conservative Government Minister Lord Ed Vaizey and former Labour MP Stephen Pound. Bin strikes in Scotland continue. We'll be heading there live to speak with GB News Scotland reporter David Donaldson and Scottish Conservative member of the Scottish Parliament Miles Briggs. And we'll bring you my latest Real Me interview with Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland, Ian Murray. Give me your political briefing, send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me @gbnews. It's reported that Liz Truss is considering a nuclear option of cutting VAT to 15%, which could save the average household more than £1,300 a year. However, Rishi Sunak's team criticised the plan as expensive and incredibly regressive. Joining me now in the studio is GB News political correspondent Tom Howard. So just explain what is being proposed by the frontrunner, Liz Truss.
Well, this isn't a formal proposition. What this is one of these ideas that has been mulled over clearly, and what often leadership campaigns do, not just leadership campaigns, but even governments do this sometimes as well, is they do something called floating ideas out in the press. So this is something that cropped up in the press over the weekend, the idea that instead of charging 20% value-added tax on goods and services sold in the economy, the government would cut that down, a 25% reduction, to 15%. Now, that would obviously mean that there was certain less upward pressure on prices. It might be a deflationary move, but potentially what it might do is just allow businesses more than households to keep ticking over. We know that businesses do not have that energy price cap. A lot of them really, really struggling. Perhaps they would maintain prices at the level they were at and able to get by a little bit easier. However, Rishi Sunak is absolutely right to say this is a monumentally expensive thing to do. Tens of billions of pounds in lost revenue from a cut like this. And there is the argument that potentially it's not the best targeted thing to do. Potentially there are some people who are better off, who could get by with the inflation, with the higher prices, with the higher energy bills as well. And really what could happen is that money could be directed more targetedly to people on lower incomes.
So we have a new Prime Minister finally next week. This will be at the top of his or her, but we're banking on her in tray. How long are anxious households going to have to wait before we get some formal announcement? Do you have any inside track on that, Tom?
Well, we do know that the Treasury has been working up a huge number of different scenarios. When whoever becomes Prime Minister steps into number 10 on Tuesday next week for the first time as Prime Minister, they will be presented with packages that are ready to go. And I would be very, very surprised if we didn't see some significant policy announcements really from the word go. There'll be no doubt a speech on the steps of Downing Street when whoever becomes Prime Minister becomes Prime Minister. That will contain within it, no doubt, commitments. Probably not in great detail, but we do know that, for example, the Liz Truss campaign has been looking at the parliamentary mechanisms to get what initially they called an emergency budget, and now they're calling a financial statement, to get that done in the first few weeks. It won't be a full budget because that requires 10 weeks of preparatory work from the Office of Budget's responsibility. What it can be, however, is a fiscal statement announcing new fiscal policy that can be enacted really rather quickly.
And Parliament isn't sitting for very long. They've been off for ages. They come back on Monday and then the break for conference, I think it's just a couple of weeks later. So one would think it would they would have to say something in that first couple of weeks. When
they would really have to do it before the conference resets kicked in, which is just in the last week of September. So yes, they have basically 3/4 of September to get everything done. It's a big task, but there's a question as to whether or not a lot of what is going to be done has already been worked out or not. No doubt policy people, not just from the campaign teams, but also policy people working in the civil service have been working up options, and those should be relatively ready to go.
Not long to wait, thank goodness, because people will be really anxious to hear the solutions as they worry about the household costs. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Now, to discuss the big political stories of the day, I am joined by former Conservative Minister, now member of the House of Lords, Ed Vaizey, and former Labour MP, Stephen Pound. Gentlemen, hi, how are you?
I'm very well, good to see you.
You're looking good. I love
Good to see you both. Well, I have to say, happy Bank Holiday Monday. We are working hard today, despite the fact it is Bank Holiday Monday. But actually, let's just start with that. Ed, do we, as Brits, certainly the English, do we get enough bank holidays off?
Well, first of all, let me say that my bank holiday is completely joyful and enhanced by seeing Stephen Pound again, because although he was on the opposite side of the aisle, like you, Gloria, he was a great adornment to the House of Commons and enormous fun. And so I'm looking forward to being entertained today by Stephen. But back to your subject, yes, we do have enough bank holidays. In fact, I think of the Americans who get very little holiday per se. If the average American worker gets, I think, about 2 weeks worth of holiday, whereas in Britain we get 4 weeks, sometimes even 5 weeks of holidays, plus a few bank holidays thrown in as well. So listen, I'm obviously incredibly lazy and a total shirker, so I'll take as many bank holidays as you can give me, but I'd find it very hard to justify a policy that brought in even more bank holidays than we already have.
Stephen, the European average, 12 days. England and Wales normally get 8. Scotland and Northern Ireland do a bit better. Stephen, more bank holidays, yes or no?
Well, I'm just coming to terms with the concept of lazy Vaizey, because, you know, he was always a bit of a go-getter, you know, when we were in the house together. But this is a new aspect of him. He's obviously chilled out now. Look, anyone who spent more than 3.5 minutes in the Royal Navy will look to a certain date, October the 21st, where there's actually a paucity of bank holidays and thinking, what a good idea. And I'm sure you and quite a few people know what October the 21st actually is relating to. But look, I think one of the nonsenses is the summer holidays, which were actually originally arranged so that school kids could go and help with the harvest. And so we have this very, very long summer holiday. The schools close down, and then you have a gap at the end of the summer holidays. It takes the kids 3 or 4 weeks to catch up with what they learned before. Well, by and large, I don't know about you, Gloria, but round my way, the kids aren't bringing in the harvest. Certainly not in West London, but to be honest, we couldn't find it if we looked for it. But they're not doing it. So I think maybe one on October the 21st, I think I'd go for that. Maybe recalibrate the summer one so that it's not just a great long stretch built around school holidays. And wouldn't it be marvellous if parents could actually afford to take their kids away on holiday instead of the peak periods when the prices go up massively?
Interesting.
Well, I'm convinced by what Stephen said. Obviously, celebrating the Battle of Waterloo, the famous naval victory on the 21st, but also I know I'm teasing you, but I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you about the school summer holidays, because they are famously built around the agricultural calendar. And although we obviously all love our farmers, we're not necessarily an agricultural nation at the moment. And shorter summer holidays would be better for our kids and better for parents.
OK, let's move on to the Conservative leadership race. My goodness, it feels like it has been going on for a very long time. Ed, you have or will be voting for Rishi Sunak. We might discuss what went wrong there. But if, as is expected, Liz Truss is the front runner, I was wondering, Ed, can you tell us anything about Liz Truss that we might not know? Because you worked with her and we didn't.
Just to give you a window into how the British establishment works, she actually went to the same college that I went to at university, but we weren't there at the same time. She's considerably younger than me. In fact, I think she'll be the first Prime Minister who's younger than me, which is pretty depressing. Even if Rishi somehow pulls it off, that would also apply. I don't actually know her that well. She's good company. She's pretty tough, I guess, and no nonsense. And she gives as good as she gets. You, Gloria, have been in the House of Commons, as has Stephen, and we all know about the tea room where MPs sit around when they're not working incredibly hard for their constituents and gossip and banter, and Liz could obviously easily hold her own in that kind of environment. I've never actually worked with her as a minister, so I don't know what she's like to deal with there, and she's had a few near misses, rumours about her being sacked by Theresa May and that kind of thing, but she's prevailed. And I think, to give her credit in a sort of crude political way, she's gone from being a Remainer Lib Dem to a hardcore Brexit Thatcherite. She's leaned into the prevailing winds and prevailed. So good luck to her, as it were.
And Stephen, normally, sort of always, in fact, a new leader, they get a bounce in the opinion.
I have to say that was one of the most diluted endorsements I've ever heard from a loyal Conservative. Ed was always cursed with an independence of spirit, which we loved on our side of the chamber. I'm not entirely sure all his colleagues did, but good to see, glad to see he's up there. Look, yes, I can still remember the brown bounce that we looked for with rather in vain, sadly, but these things do happen. But look, I think the thing with Liz Truss, to be semi-serious just for a second, if ever there was a politician who had hidden shallows, it's Liz Truss. I mean, they criticise politicians, say they're like the cushion that bears the impression of the last person who sat on it. I mean, every day she's coming up with ludicrous, uncosted, headline-grabbing, idiotic suggestions, which aren't thought forward, or if they come forward, like the idea of cutting VAT on alcohol for a start. Cheaper beer is always a good thing at this time. You've got no argument with that. But, untold, uncosted billions. And I think the problem is that she is the ultimate shallow soundbite politician. And compare her with a serious, perhaps, dare I say, a former director of public prosecutions, somebody who's a bit more sober, serious and pragmatic. I think it's no contest.
I mean, Stephen, I'm tempted to say you would say that because you are a Labour politician, but actually perhaps she is being underestimated. She didn't start off as the front runner in this contest. She's pretty much demolished Rishi Sunak. There is no reason why she couldn't do the same to Keir Starmer, is there?
Well, I think it says a lot about the constituency that were voting for her. The MPs voted overwhelmingly for Rishi Sunak. From the Labour point of view, now it's over. You can say that Jeremy Hunt was the person we were terrified of. because usually the iron law of British politics is after, sort of an exhibitionist, is sort of, one of these sort of really publicity-conscious MPs, the people, prime ministers like Boris, you tend to get someone sober. After Churchill, you get Attlee, after Trump, you get Biden, and so on. And we thought that Jeremy Hunt would be that sensible person. Yes, she has prevailed. Yes, she has changed her mind. She does, flow with the wind. I mean, fair enough. That's, not every politician can deny that. But ultimately, I don't think those are the qualities which will endear herself to the public. In the Labour Party, we have a tradition of electing someone as our leader who is wildly popular within the party, not so popular on the doorstep. I think we're going to see that all over again.
Now, I think that what is interesting, just very briefly, is that, I'm a Rishi supporter and I have voted for him online. That's how sophisticated the Tory party is. But I have I'm not moving towards Liz Truss, but I do acknowledge that, in a basically hand-to-hand combat, which has been this incredibly long and tedious leadership election, Liz Truss has kind of beaten Rishi Sunak fair and square. And that is a political test, and that is the kind of quality you need to be an effective leader and prime minister. I'm not saying that she will be the best prime minister we've ever had or whatever, or will even succeed in the job, but at least on one level she can claim, look, I went head to head with Rishi Sunak, fair fight, I won.
You two are being very respectful of each other. You started off by saying how lovely it was to see one another, which is very nice. So I wanted to get your thoughts on Lucy Powell. Lucy Powell is the shadow culture minister, and she was getting ready for Manchester Pride at the weekend, and she wore a T-shirt saying "Never kissed a Tory." She's not particularly on the sort of hard left of the party. Is it a sort of light-hearted joke? Or actually, does it diminish our politics, Ed?
Well, Stephen, I thought Stephen was going to rush out with his confessions of the Tories that he's kissed. But I mean, I would say that it gets.
And Woody and I were good friends.
Say that again, Stephen. I missed it. Are you talking about snogging Tories?
No, listen. It begs the obvious question: how would you know? And I'd say it's slightly better than the rather tacky one that certain Conservatives used to have, to say, life's better under the Conservatives. I think on that basis, but ultimately, I'm sorry. I hope it's light-hearted. Lucy's a very, very sensible. She's a leadership contender. She's a sane, sensible person. Maybe she was wearing it because it was Pride. I don't know, but all I think it looked a wee bit silly. And as I said, how on earth would you know? She obviously goes to different parties that I go to.
It gets under the skin of Conservatives, that kind of slogan, which is why she got so much pushback on Twitter. And there was a Conservative kind of press spokeswoman called Joanne Nadler. I mean, she's still around, but she wrote a book called Too Nice to Be a Tory. And she and I both suffered from having to put up with patronising Labour people. I remember my first day in the House of Commons, David Miliband came up to me looking utterly perplexed. I said, "Why are you a Tory?" And you get all this stuff from Labour people. I'm obviously not accusing Gloria or Stephen of this, of the sort of moral high ground stuff, which is, how can any normal human being vote Tory? Well, frankly, lots of normal human beings vote Tory, which is why you get a lot of Tory governments. And that this kind of feeling from the left that it's somehow immoral to be a Tory is sort of encapsulated in that slogan, "Never kissed a Tory." And that's why it irritates people. And it seemed a slightly pointless thing for Lucy to do. I couldn't quite also work out the link with Pride, but there you go. So I think that's why it's caused such a kind of blowback on Twitter.
Can I ask
Edward Heath, when I first got elected, I saw Edward Heath struggling with a large Chinese vase at the base of Normanshire South, and I offered to help him. And he said, where's your constituency? And I said, Ealing. He said, it's good to know there's some sound Tories left and some sensible people like you. Labour chaps would never, ever offer to help me up the stairs with this rare Chinese vase. And I felt dropping it.
We've got about a minute left, so short answer to this one. Michael Gove has been partying again. Last summer, we saw him in an Aberdeen nightclub. This weekend, he's been pictured in an Ibiza nightclub. Is he all right, Ed Vaizey?
He's fine. He's staying with a friend of mine, and I think that's just a very nice Conservative small C and big C house party. And I think he just went out for a small baby sham before returning to bed at 9 o'clock.
We've got some inside info there. He's staying with your friend, is he? I believe it was his birthday.
It was his birthday. It was his birthday weekend.
So come on, Stephen, are politicians allowed to have fun? We say we want politicians to be human, and then we monster them when we see signs of them being human.
I don't think we monster them. I mean, I wish I had a postal vote for the Prime Minister of Finland, who I think is absolutely marvellous. It's very good. All I can say is that she cuts some slightly better shapes than Michael.
She's definitely a better dancer than Michael Gove.
Down with the kids, but
it's a low bar.
If ever I've seen anyone epitomise D-mob happy, it's Michael Gove. Cheers.
Cheers. I'm not going to ask you how you obtained that GB News. There'll be one in the post soon. Gentlemen, a pleasure. Local authority short break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. We're going to go to some footage from the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral in Florida. If you're watching on TV, we're looking at the Artemis 1 rocket, which is due to launch this afternoon in a bid to return humankind to the moon. No one has set foot on the moon since 1972. This mission hopes to change that. There are no crew members on board today, but it's the first stage of NASA's attempt to touch down by the end of 2025. And we'll see the first woman land on the lunar surface. There's full coverage on GB News throughout the day. It is hoped a new pay officer could be made to unions in a bid to end the bin workers' strike in Scotland. Bin strikes now affect 2/3 of Scotland's local authorities. Rubbish is building up in many towns and city centres. Joining me now is Scotland reporter Davy Donaldson. Davy, good to see you. Literally, how are people coping?
Very badly, in a word, and you can see why, given the amount of rubbish that's lying strewn around the streets of Edinburgh. I have to laugh, there's a sign here, it says, "Stop birds spreading litter, close the bin lid." Well, I think it's a little bit late for that because, as you can see, there's rubbish just piling up absolutely everywhere. This is the 12th day of the 12-day strikes in Edinburgh by Edinburgh City Council bin workers, and as you can see, it's really, really causing problems. And even worse than that, the rubbish on the city. If we go this way, just come over here just for a second, you can see what people are doing down here. They're just pouring the rubbish over the side of this fence here and binning it there. That's going to take forever to fill up, and that's just one area in the city. obviously we've got lots of other areas like this across Edinburgh, so you can imagine how difficult that's going to be. You talked there about a pay offer. There has been a pay offer on the table from COSLA. Understand that the three unions are going to meet and debate about that, and obviously they'll have to ballot members to decide whether they're going to accept that or not. There are other strikes going across Scotland as well, so there's lots of other areas being affected by bin strikes. We've got Aberdeenshire, West Lothian, Glasgow, etc. I was in Glasgow the other day. It was pretty full already at the bins there, pretty full already, so that's only going to compound the matter and make it worse. And we've got a health issue here as well, because we've got seagulls pecking away at the rubbish, bringing rubbish right across the city, and then we've got the issue with rats as well, which have been spotted, and little wonder given what we're seeing. So yeah, it remains to see how long this is going to take to sort out, but certainly something needs to happen.
David Donaldson, thank you so much. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the Scottish member of the Scottish Parliament, Miles Briggs. Miles, good to see you. Can I start by just asking a very human question? Are you affected by the bin strikes? And if so, what are you doing with your rubbish?
Yes, well, I live here in Edinburgh, and yes, for the last week we've seen rubbish building up. My bins are overflowing here in the flats I live in, but it is heartbreaking to see the capital in such a mess, and residents across the city, who I represent, are not only angry about the situation, they're also now concerned about the public health implications that this potentially will have as well.
What would Nicola Sturgeon to bring this to a close?
Well, she has the purse strings in this at the end of the day. Local councils do not have any more flexibility. In fact, council budgets have been cut by the SNP Green government year on year. In fact, this latest financial year, £250 million have been taken out of local authority spending. So what we now need to see, I think, is Nicola Sturgeon get round the table with the unions to finally end this. It's quite clear that the agreement which has been reached in England and Wales and Northern Ireland can stop these strikes. So I think what we now need to see is Nicola Sturgeon to show that leadership and get round the tables with the unions and finally end this.
You say that because it's not the position, for example, that Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, has taken with the rail strikes. He won't meet the unions. Why should Nicola Sturgeon?
Well, like I said, in terms of there is no flexibility within councils to offer any additional money. The 5% which was offered actually came from the Scottish Government stepping up, saying that they'd found another 140 million, sorry. So it's quite clear that if we are going to have any additional money, the Scottish Government will have to provide that, and we need to see that leadership. Otherwise, this will just carry on.
Final question to you. I was looking at your Twitter. You're backing Rishi Sunak, I gather from looking at your Twitter feed. Where did it all go wrong for your man?
Well, I'm not so sure. I think there's still a lot of people who have been voting over the last week, and certainly from the conversations I've been having, I think as we've come to the end of this, actually more supporters have been trying to decide out of the two who they're going to back, and I've certainly been picking up a lot of people voting for Rishi. So there's still time. A lot of people, I think, probably over the summer haven't taken a decision until much later. So let's see what the actual outcome is, but I think it's going to be far closer than maybe people are suggesting.
Well, hope to talk to you after the result. Thanks for your time today, Miles.
Good to see you. Thanks, Gloria.
Coming up after the break, it's time for the latest edition of The Real Me with Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland, Ian Murray, who shares with me his experience of watching his dad collapse and die in front of him when he was just 9 years old. First, it is your news headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 12:31. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. NASA is making its final preparations ahead of a planned launch of its new moon rocket in the next couple of hours. The unmanned rocket is the world's most powerful to date. We can see a little glimpse now of those preparations underway. Well, it's going to propel a test capsule called Orion far from Earth into the moon's orbit. It's the Artemis 1 mission, and it's aiming to prove that people can go to the moon for longer and more sustainably than ever before. Engineers at NASA say they're currently working through pre-launch operations. The mission is due to last 42 days in total, and the capsule will travel 1.3 million miles before splashing down in the Pacific on October the 10th. Now, the rocket is scheduled to take off from the Kennedy Space Center just after 1:30 this afternoon. Of course, those timings could move. When it happens, we'll bring it to you live here on GB News. Residents now living near Europe's biggest nuclear facility in Ukraine are being given iodine tablets amid fears of a nuclear incident. Authorities handed out the medication to parents and children living close to the Zaporizhzhia power station amid intense fighting. Well, a team from the International Atomic Energy Agency are on their way to investigate the now Russian-occupied facility, saying its safety and security must be protected. Liz Truss's campaign says she favours targeted support to ease the cost of living crisis rather than help for all. However, the Tory leadership candidate says she's not ruling anything out as the contest enters its final week. Ms Truss also says it wouldn't be right to announce her entire plan before she's seen the full Whitehall analysis. The government has confirmed Gibraltar's status as a city more than 180 years after it was first bestowed the title by Queen Victoria. Well, that was in 1842, but then it was then left off the official list of recognised cities. Now, a newly published record confirms Gibraltar's inclusion. Prime Minister Boris Johnson describes the decision as a huge accolade to its rich history and dynamism. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back with Gloria and the briefing.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.169 and 1.171 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,479 and 23 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The time is 12:36 and it's time for the latest in my very different interviews with politicians where we go behind the politics and get to know the real person. Recently, I sat down with Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland, Ian Murray. Ian Murray, I have to say, we got elected at the same time and you were one of the most normal colleagues in there. 'Cause You can't say that for every MP.
Normality is not this usual thing.
No, it's really not. But I remember meeting you earlier on thinking, my goodness, a normal person. You were the first person in your family to go to university. Your family had jobs, not careers.
Yeah.
Tell me about what sort of jobs they had.
Yeah, well, my father was a cooper and built barrels most of his life until he went into management and into exporting of whiskey. So enjoyed that immensely. And my mum was a cleaner, a bookmaker, a kitchen porter, you name it. I mean, she's tried her hand at most things and enjoyed them, but very low-paying jobs.
You went to university though. Was that because of your mum and dad instilling that into you?
Yeah, I mean, I went to Western Hales Education Centre, and for your viewers, that's essentially a community high school and ranks at the bottom of every league table in Edinburgh. And I got to 5th year and got on very well. We had a lovely cohort of people in my year and got on really well with the teaching staff. And I just remember messing about in the corridor one lunchtime, and the assistant head walked past and said, "Murray, my office," and I thought I was in real trouble. And he said, "Look, there's nothing really here for you at school next year. Do you fancy going straight to university?" And I just jumped at the chance. It was a great idea, and he eventually forced me into it, essentially, but best thing I've ever done.
How old were you when you went to university?
When I first walked through the door, 16.
How does that work? That's incredible. You must have been a genius.
I won't give away too many of my secrets. It wouldn't happen now, but you could get served in all the pubs at 16 with your student card. So I can't really remember too much about it.
Gosh, I mean, there can't be many 16-year-olds at your university.
There weren't many at Edinburgh.
So you're at Edinburgh, so one of the poshest universities in the UK.
Yeah, it was my home city and my home university, and I loved it. Would I do it again? Would I advise anybody to go at 16? Probably not. I mean, I wish I'd gone and travelled for a bit, or gone and done something else, or maybe even gone to university in a different city or a different country and broadened my horizons a bit. But it was a great idea at the time, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Did you live at home?
I did for the first year, and then I went and lived in various flats, various scandal-ridden flats around Edinburgh, which are still much talked about.
Oh, you might tell us some of your best bits later. But let's get serious first of all, because the most terrible thing happens to you when you're 9 years old.
Yeah.
Tell me what happened to your dad.
We were a small but very close family. I mean, there was only 8 of us. Eight of us, yeah. There was me, my older brother, my mum and dad, and 3 grandparents and an uncle. That was the entire pretty much extended family, all living next to each other as you did back then, within about a mile of each other. And Wednesday nights were lads' night in our house because mum went to the bingo and dad and the 2 boys played on the 6-foot snooker table. And the only reason we did that on a Wednesday when mum was at bingo is because we got blue chalk all over the walls because the room wasn't big enough to play the snooker properly. And one Wednesday evening, dad hadn't been feeling too well. He'd been a bit poorly. And it's a funny story when you tell it, but actually the consequences are pretty huge. But we were playing snooker and he was in his pyjamas and his pyjama bottoms fell down. And I was only 9, so I started laughing. My brother was a little bit embarrassed and a bit concerned, but just thought he was messing around, and then never missed a ball for about 10 minutes. Just potted everything, and we were going, "This is a bit strange." 10 minutes later, he's on the floor. So I'd had a cerebral hemorrhage. I thought it was the flu for the weeks before. Of course, my brother phoned the bingo. My mum came rushing home, and our only concern as young lads was to get this snooker table away because mum would have been furious that we were playing snooker in the lounge. So we managed to get it back into the cupboard. And he just lay there, sort of motionless. And we got eventually the ambulance came. We were packed off into the room, and the 3 things I remember about it were that firstly, I peeked out the room as the ambulance were taking him away, and he was sick everywhere, which seemingly happens when you've had some kind of trauma. Your body empties out. We thought, oh, he's maybe just a bit ill. And then 4 o'clock in the morning or so, we shared a room. Mum came back and said, "Look, Dad's not coming home." And then I sort of went back to sleep, didn't really know what was going on. And then about 7 o'clock in the following morning, woke up, went into the lounge, and the whole family were sitting there. And that's when it really sunk in, because it was a sort of pink NHS bag with all his stuff in it, including his pyjamas that kept falling down and his glasses on the top. And that was really sort of defined the family. The lesson in there is he had been ill for some time, but didn't tell anyone, and should have really got some advice. Whether or not in the mid-80s, he was only 39, you would have been able to get the medical attention required to sort something like that, I don't know, because obviously it's moved on quite a bit. But, he was having blackouts at work and wasn't telling anyone. He was, feeling a bit depressed, which is all the great symptoms of having something wrong with your brain. And, at 39, that was him. Now, I'm 6 years older than that now, so I reflect on it a lot. And being a father now as well, I reflect on it a lot. But yeah, I mean, utterly traumatic, and my poor mum had to deal with the consequences of it, really.
How does a 9-year-old make sense of that? Children in many ways are quite robust with trauma, but there must be lasting consequences of that moment, or not.
I mean, it's difficult because as a 9-year-old, maybe I was too young. So I suppose the only consequences of that moment for me is I didn't really know him. I've got memories of holidays and that kind of stuff. But when you're 9, I think you might just be a little bit too young to hang on to that sort of much wider memory of anybody, let alone your own father. But it's only now when you reflect back, you think, that must have been pretty traumatic. Would I be where I am now if that hadn't happened? Who knows? Has it been an inspiration my entire life and I've not known about it? Don't know. Do I think that he's a great inspiration to me now because he's someone that I still, talk to and think is there? So probably. But it's really difficult to know what the full impacts are. But, it happens to a lot of families, and a son losing a father is pretty difficult. But, my mum obviously went into 6th gear and brought up 2 boys on her own.
Do you still have your mum?
Yeah, she's still around, yeah. Yeah, she's 75 now.
She's done a remarkable job, hasn't she?
She's good, and she did it by, she worked 2 jobs. She worked in the bookmakers and she cleaned in the mornings, bookmakers in the afternoon. Her favourite day was Grand National Day when she was on the chalkboards chalking up all the odds and things and all the totes. I mean, she loved that job, and she just worked her way through various jobs.
What's her name? She sounds amazing.
Yeah, Lena. Yeah, she's great. Yeah, she's. She doesn't talk about it at all, which is really quite interesting. She's never ever spoken about it, apart from her regret that she didn't let us boys go to the funeral, which was a choice she made at the time, and I think she regrets that. But she's never spoken about it.
She was trying to be kind,
Probably.
wanting you not to go to the funeral.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's done through love,
and she made the right choice, but she regrets it now, I think. Yeah. But that's the only thing she's ever spoken about.
And you don't have any
memory of it whatsoever. No. Yeah, no memory of it whatsoever. So, yeah, it's a regret she has, but she just really shouldn't.
So you have this major trauma, one of the worst traumas. You're there at the time, and then you've become a child genius, and you're at university at age 16. Did something happen? Were you always really, really clever?
I just loved school.
Really?
I really loved school. In fact, I probably would be a teacher if I had to choose another profession. I just loved school, and it wasn't necessarily a love for learning. I just loved the camaraderie of the classroom. I really got on well with the teachers. I loved to learn. I was very numeric. I still don't write properly, so it was never about literacy. It was more about numeracy, and I just loved being at school. So, and I think if you enjoy something, you thrive on it. So I was never a child genius or anything like that. I just really enjoyed being at school.
So you said you loved numbers, but you said I can barely write properly now.
Yeah. I mean, I was very, very, very into numbers, but I just my grammar's horrendous. Split infinitives, whatever they are.
Whatever they are. Nobody knows.
Where do you put the? When do you use a semicolon? I have no idea.
Did you do a maths degree?
Well, actually, when I went to university at 16, I was enrolled for maths and physics.
Goodness me.
And I did 3 months of it and hated it and ditched it. And I bumped into the director of studies at the law school in a pub one night, and we just got chatting, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Maths and physics, but I hate it." And he went, "Well, why don't you see if you can switch across?" Ended up doing social policy, politics and law. So
completely different,
and loved it. So yeah, it was a bit of a coincidence that I met this guy in the pub, but also I just couldn't see myself doing maths and physics for any longer than 5 minutes, never mind 5 years.
So you graduate by the age of
20.
Wow.
So
because they're 4-year degrees.
What a year that was. I graduated. My favourite football club won the Scottish Cup for the first time in 42 years, and Labour won the landslide election in '97.
Well, I know about the '97 one. Who's your favourite football club?
Hearts Football Club, Heart of Midlothian.
So, we got elected in 2010. You are the only Scottish Labour MP to keep their seat in 2015. And I remember, you remember, but just so other people know, I mean, so much of the Parliamentary Labour Party was made up of Scottish MPs.
Yeah.
It's hard to even contemplate now. You hold on to your seat, the only person to do so. And of course, like, there's a position for Scottish Secretary in the Shadow Cabinet. Well, who else is going to... Of course, you're very qualified. But, I mean, literally, even if you weren't, you probably may well be Scottish Secretary. Tell me about your appointment.
Well, it was strange. I mean, I might get some of this slightly wrong, but because I'd been the only person to win, my phone for 24 hours was just completely red hot. And there was this woman called Harriet from the BBC Scotland, who was phoning me up constantly to say, could you do drive time? Could you do the morning show? Could you do Good Morning Scotland? And what about Sunday shows? Obviously, because the election was on the Thursday, elected overnight on the Thursday night into the Friday. And I just said, look, it's been a really tough election. I've done all the media I really want to do. I've nothing else to say. And until things settle down, I'm not quite sure I want to do any more. And she kept ringing and ringing. And then my phone rang again, and I just picked it up. I was in my flat at home, the flat I still live in, and I just said, Ian Murray speaking, and I just heard this, it's Harriet here, and I didn't hear anything else. The voice on the other side of the phone said, I'd like you to join the Shadow Cabinet. And I thought I heard, are you joining the Shadow Cabinet? And I went, look, Harriet, will you stop bothering me? It's been a long week. You know, I am the only one that's left. We're all in a bit of shock here. And I'm sick of journalists phoning me asking the Shadow Cabinet. So the answer is no comment. And I put the phone down. And actually, the phone rang again. It was Harriet Harman, as the acting leader of the Labour Party, offering me a place in the Shadow Cabinet. So I apologise profusely. And she promised never to mention it. And I promised I would never tell the story. But you know Harriet, I mean, Harriet's quite stern. She's quite...
Yeah, yes. But, oh my goodness.
And she must have been thinking, it's the only one we've got. And he's just turned it down. What am I going to do now?
Oh, gosh, that's a very funny story. That's a very funny story. And you're still Scottish Secretary. You resigned from the Shadow Cabinet under Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
We all did.
Yeah, just unsustainable, yeah.
I shouldn't say we all, but you and I, most people did. It's reported that you thought very seriously about leaving the Labour Party and joining Change UK. You didn't. Was it a tough decision? Were you nearly there?
Yeah, it was a tough decision. I mean, all the stuff that's written about this, most of it's rubbish. It was weeks before I decided to pull out. But actually, I think it's a really positive thing because we all sat there in our darkest days thinking this isn't the Labour Party anymore. And some of us felt as if we had the responsibility to do something about it. Now, others took a step much longer than I had by joining Change UK or leaving the party altogether or, you know, deciding they weren't going to run again. And that was all absolutely fine. But I just decided to stay and fight because I felt it was my party and not theirs. And in actual fact, I felt a responsibility as a custodian of the Labour Party that I would fight for it. So I've no criticisms of the people that did leave. I've no criticisms of the people that did what they did because they all did it for the right reasons. And ultimately, as we look back now, the Labour Party's on the verge of perhaps being in government. Maybe we all made the right decision. And the aggregate of all of that has now got us to where we've got to now. And I hope that's the case.
So you are the only Scottish Labour MP. The SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, hegemonic for so long. They have been in power. Do you think you'll see an independent Scotland within your lifetime?
I absolutely don't think I will, because it just doesn't work. They just cannot find a viable way of promoting a proposition that works. And that's not to say they might not win it eventually. And Nicola Sturgeon said last week that if they lose a second one, they'll have a third. And all this stuff now about mandates, about Brexit, about the Tories, about all of the excuses that they give for another referendum are all the excuses that were given the day after the last one. So they would just find an excuse and a trigger to have one. And as all that's happening, and I see it in my own constituency day in, day out, NHS is getting worse, educational attainment gaps widening, transport's dreadful, the economy's slipping behind the rest of the UK, the number of high-rate taxpayers is diminishing, the demographics are much older and therefore all the problems that comes with that. And none of that's being dealt with. It's just all Westminster's fault, vote for independence. And I just think at some point something will break and Scottish voters will go, we can't go on like this. And maybe that'll take another referendum. You know, I don't want one. We shouldn't have one. If we end up having one, we'll fight very, very hard to stay in the United Kingdom. But something's going to have to break to get out of this. Otherwise, we're going to stay on this constitutional merry-go-round and things are just going to get worse. This Scottish Government essentially uses the Scottish Parliament to manage decline.
OK, I just want to ask you a final question. You became a dad 2 years ago. What's the best thing about that?
What the best thing about that? Gosh. I mean, your whole focus just changes. So, you know, the responsibility is huge. I've only ever looked after myself. But the responsibility is huge. Mariam's such a brilliant mum. I mean, she's the nurturer. So essentially, Mariam's the director of catering and nurturing, and I'm the director of entertainment. And I just love, she makes me laugh every day, Zola. She's just the funniest thing. And seeing her grow up is the best thing about fatherhood.
Why can't you cook?
I can certainly cook, but you know, I have the facilities, but not the ability to create the milk. So that's why she's director of catering.
Good,
so
good clarification
I absolutely can cook. I thought I used to be a chef, so
yes,
I can
you did.
cook. I used to have my own pubs and used to be a chef. So, but yeah, fatherhood's just great. And I've become a father very late. I was 44 when Zola was born, and I think that's a really good thing because I've had a brilliant life up to now, and now it's just a different life, and I love it. And she's great to be around, and she makes me laugh, and it really does refocus what's important.
You know, despite the trauma, unbelievably traumatic event that had you, you're just a very positive person. Yeah. It's been really engaging to listen to you and chat to you. Thank you, Ian Murray.
It's great to see you.
Thank you. Shadow Scottish Secretary talking to me there. Well, in the last few weeks, we've seen the Finnish Prime Minister, Sanna Marin, being hounded in the media for partying, and now Michael Gove has been spotted partying in Ibiza. Should the media relax and just let politicians have a good time? Joining me now is the political editor of the Huffington Post, Kevin Schofield. Kevin.
Gloria.
Hello, good to see you. Should we all chill out about Michael Gove? Like going to a nightclub. We did the same in Aberdeen last summer. He was seen dad dancing. We say we want our politicians to be human, and then when they're human, we all go a bit bananas.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. I mean, we all complain that MPs are robots. They don't have a mind of their own. They're boring, they're dull, they're out of touch with ordinary people. And then we get a little bit bent out of shape when we see someone or one of them actually going out and acting like a normal person and enjoying themselves, you know. So I don't personally have a problem with it. Obviously, Michael Gove maybe enjoys going out more than the average MP. I don't know. The one you mentioned up in Aberdeen last year was very funny. I remember that video. And he just didn't care, obviously. You know, he was dressed not like he was going clubbing. He was dressed like an MP, but he was still out just having fun, and he didn't care. And I just think, yeah, why not? You know, I mean, as you say, we're always saying MPs aren't in touch with ordinary people. Well, what better way to get in touch than to actually go out and socialise and meet ordinary people, and actually you might pick up a few ideas along the way. So personally speaking, I don't see it as a problem.
I just wonder if there's an issue with people who get obsessed with politics pretty much straight after school or university, but then really miss their youth because they're too busy, I don't know, reading Hansard or whatever they're doing. And they have to rediscover their youth later in life. Hence, we've got a man in his sort of mid-50s doing what a normal man might do in his 20s. Do you reckon that theory holds any sway?
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit. I mean, Michael Gove's a bit older than me, and I wouldn't be seen dead in a nightclub these days because I would feel so embarrassed. No, they're not for me. They're for much younger people than me. So there might be a bit of that. They might sort of regret devoting so much of their earlier life. Maybe when he was a student, he probably, as you say, spent too much time reading biographies of Margaret Thatcher, maybe, rather than actually going out and enjoying student lifestyle. So maybe it's a chance now, especially now I suppose that he's not in government anymore, and he said it himself a couple of weeks ago that he's not going back into government. He's been pretty clear about that, especially if Liz Truss wins. So yeah, he might as well just enjoy himself. So yeah, I think you're right. I think that might be part of it, that politicians, no offence, Gloria, I know you're a former politician, but politicians, generally speaking, a lot of them are quite strange people, you know. So they're not what, you know, a lot of them are not like ordinary people. So I think any time that they do behave like ordinary people, it's to be welcomed rather than criticised.
Very good. And just to say, I was a former political journalist and a former politician, and I couldn't dance in either of those roles. So I'm in good company. Kevin, always a pleasure to chat to you. Enjoy your bank holiday Monday. Thanks for coming to chat to us. You have been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Before we go, let's just show you Those live pictures from Florida, where we're awaiting that launch of the Artemis 1 rocket, which will eventually see humankind return to the moon by 2025. This will be the first time since 1972 that people have set foot on the lunar surface, and the first ever time that a woman has been on the moon. We will bring you full coverage here on GB News. Before that, let's take a look at the weather back here on Earth. Looking ahead to this afternoon, showers developing across the north and east. Let's take a look at the details. Many northern and eastern shine. There will be showers developing, especially over the high ground. Northern Ireland may also see the odd shower develop, but most will miss them and have a dry afternoon with some spells of sunshine. Northern England will see a fair amount of cloud this afternoon, but it will be mostly dry. The best of any sunshine will be along Irish Sea coasts. Wales, though, will tend to see brighter skies this afternoon, especially out towards the west. A few showers may develop, but most will be dry, with temperatures reaching the mid-20s in places. The Midlands will see a dry bank holiday afternoon, but there will be a fair bit of cloud around, especially in the east. Despite this, temperatures will reach the low 20s. It may feel a tad cooler than late across East Anglia this afternoon as a keen northeasterly breeze develops. It will be dry, though, although rather cloudy. The east to northeast breeze will also be noticeable along the south coast this afternoon. Many of us will see some sunny spells, especially out towards the west. Cloud will then melt away as we move towards the evening, but some showers will continue in the north. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton.